Greg, man, thank you so much for coming on the show here today. Super excited you on by far the best dressed guest I've ever had on the podcast. And we're 400 episodes in, so that's saying something. But
400 episodes, man, I am like super fired up. That's like high pressure. I'm honored. Wow.
Yeah. You're dressed for success though, man. You're going to do great. So would you start by just like telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do for a living?
Sure. Exercise physiologist growing up. Like that was my career for a long time. Worked with the Canadian Olympic team through the Sports Center network and supported summer sport athletes for a long time. Did my master's PhD. That was all in sort of medical world. So I had a research practice at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto where we used exercise for kids with cystic fibrosis and leukemia and a bunch of other diseases as well. Commentated a couple of Olympics that led to public speaking, books, consulting, and that's where we are today. I'm doing a lot of speaking, a lot of book writing, and just trying to get the health and well-being message out to everybody, because I know that so many people struggle, and I'm a much better knowledge translator than I am a hardcore researcher. So pivoting my life towards just translating science to help people these days.
I love it, man. I love it. So talk to me, what got you started in this space? Like what got you interested in working out and then maybe got you into kind of the profession that you're in now?
It was not the plan. So I was in high school very much following along with all of my buddies doing business related type stuff because that's what I was into. But I was a competitive swimmer and we went down to Florida on a training camp. And when I was on that training camp in Florida, my buddies and I went out into the waves and we're playing in the ocean and I got picked up by a wave, dropped on my head, broke my neck in a bunch of places, was in traction for 3 months, neurosurgery, rehab, all those sorts of things afterwards. Ultimately ended up being back in competitive swimming, swam varsity, didn't make the Olympic team. All my friends made the Olympics. I didn't. But that really is what sparked my interest in the human body. And I took, my original plan was to do business in college, but I got there and I took an anatomy course, loved it, pivoted to kinesiology, took kinesiology, started a business out of university, rapidly ran into senior executives who were asking me to justify my rates. And one of them, one day, she was like, what are your qualifications? And I was like, I have a phys ed degree. And she's like, you need to go back to school, young man. So I went back and did a master's, PhD, postdoc. That led to being a physiologist with Olympic level athletes and being a physiologist in an exercise lab at Sick Kids. Built those research programs, led into being a prof at the University of Toronto for almost a decade. Now taking that information and sharing it with everybody. But it really came down to being an athlete, breaking my neck, coming back, and following along that journey because I got fascinated by the human body.
Yeah, I love it. So talk to me, because I'm sure people are going to listen to like your background and your bio, and they're like, this sounds really cool, right? Because especially now, like people want to be content creators. They want to write books and do the things that you're doing. Would you give us a little bird's eye view? Like what does an average day look like for you these days? And I'm sure probably they're all a little bit different, but like what are some of the big rocks that you got to do every day to kind of move the needle in your business?
Got it. So it's interesting because I actually struggle with that a lot because every day is so different. And so there are some core things I try to do over the course of a week. And it varies a little bit. So my days are flexible. My weeks are less flexible. So the number one single most important thing is I need to work out. If I don't do some sort of physical activity, I literally get depressed. And I'm not just joking. Like I have clinical depression if I don't exercise. That is number one. And I let that go for a long time, especially during the pandemic. And I realized like, if I don't work out, I'm not a good person. So I really need to make sure that that's a core practice. Beyond that, what I try to do is every week, I try to create some sort of content, usually 10 to 15 minutes regarding a very important topic that I'm interested in. And then I film, that 10 to 15 minute video. I scrape out the audio that goes on my podcast. I turn it into an article that goes on LinkedIn, my blog, my newsletter, and my couple other places, Medium. I then take that, flip it to someone else. They create some images. Those go out on Instagram. We chop it up into videos that goes on Instagram, LinkedIn. So we have that content generation pipeline that I run every single week. It takes about a day for me to do it and then a couple days for everyone else to chop up all the other stuff and get it out there.
Sure.
And that's how I drive attention towards health and wellness, right? I just try to give people bite-sized pieces of information that they can use in their everyday lives that are based on science. I do my research and I am a researcher, so I find the study and explain it to people and try to make it interesting. So that's part one. I usually do a keynote once a week somewhere for some company.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I try to be speaking at least once a week if I possibly can. Every 2 years, I write a new book. So I just started writing the next book. It's going to be about cortisol and stress,
Oh, okay.
but more about cortisol than stress. I wanted to explore hormones a little bit and how that might work. Usually 1 or 2 coaching sessions a week with some executives that I'm coaching, and then just a lot of business development work, just like meeting with people and talking to people. And I still maintain a research practice at SickKids, so I also try to monitor what's going on there and raise money for that program and keep publishing papers and crunching data. And then I'm also a dad, right? So I try to take my kids to some events every once in a while and talk to Judith, my wife. And so it's busy and it's pretty flexible, but I love what I do. And I left a tenured position at the university, right? So I had the stability, I had all of those sorts of things, the pension, the benefits, everything. But I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so that's where I'm at. It's what I'm doing. And I'm just kind of going on the journey.
Okay. So I have to ask, while this is like top of mind, did you just feel compelled? Like, again, most people would love the stability, right? Like, I'm going to get X amount every 2 weeks. I know I've got this job for as long as I want it. Like, did you just feel compelled to do something like bigger or greater?
No, you know what? It's not, it's interesting because, I very deliberately made sure that I didn't think about it as bigger or greater because we need people in those positions, generating the knowledge, doing the research. And so I don't think about what I'm doing as bigger or greater because I value that so much. I just recognized, like, you go through the tenure process and it is difficult getting tenure, especially at the University of Toronto. It's hyper competitive and very, very difficult. It can be somewhat acrimonious sometimes because you're open to criticism from anyone, and anyone anywhere in the world can take a shot at you anonymously, and that's their chance. So, like, if you've ever done anything wrong ever in your career, it's coming back at you at that particular moment in time. So it was super challenging. Got tenured, got pension, got the benefits, got the raise, got the promotion, got everything that I had been working for probably 25 years.
Wow.
And then I was sitting in my office looking out the window, and I felt terrible and did some journaling, called a friend of mine who's an unbelievable coach, and landed on the fact that this actually wasn't what my true gift is. My true gift is knowledge translation.
Yeah.
I'm really, like, when I commentated the Olympics for Canadian television, I did a series called Superbodies, went viral around the world. We took the science of how the athletes' bodies worked in competition and showed people that using CGI and some other really cool things. And it was incredible. Cool. It was so cool. It was super fun. And I loved doing it. That led to writing books. That led to public speaking. And that, to me, is where I can really make a difference. Like, I can speak to a high school gym full of teenagers and get them to understand the value of sleep by showing them the inside of the human body using MRI and cool graphics, and explain to them why healthy food cleans out oxidative damage from stress, right? And people benefit from that. And that's where I think I can make the bigger difference in the world. And all of that flashed in front of my eyes. And so I called my dean, who I had unbelievable respect for, one of the people in my career that I've encountered that I have the most respect for, and outlined that to him. And I was like, what do you think I should do? And he's like, well, if I were you, I would go do that thing. He's like, it's going to be bad for me, but it's probably going to be really good for you. And I kept my research program. I moved that to SickKids Hospital, but I stopped doing the teaching, stopped doing the committee work and all the admin, and just went all in on knowledge translation and being a speaker, author, entrepreneur. And so it just felt right. It's been difficult. And it was crazy because the logic was around, you know what, even if my business goes down by 50%, I still should be okay. And I left the university in 2019, and next year COVID hit and my business went to zero. Gosh. So it was like, I've kicked myself many, many times. This has not been a fun few years, but we've made it and it's okay. And now we're back into a great place. And, but that was the journey and that was the decision-making around it.
I love it. Yeah, one other thing that I want to highlight here, and this is especially for coaches of all shapes and sizes, right? Because there's kind of like this running joke, like if you're a trainer, you're a coach, you're the last person to get a program written, right? Like, I'm the last person to write my own program because I'm writing everybody else's. And then I think about my own program or my own workout. So I love that you said, number one, I have to work out. And this is something I've realized over the years too. Like, I am a miserable human being. I can tell. Like if I go 5 days, right, just because stuff's going on, or I've got other commitments, 5 days is about the limit. And I get to 5 days and I'm a miserable, insufferable human being to be around. So I think that's just such great advice. Like if you're going to take care of others, you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself first. And it's not selfish in a negative way. It's selfish knowing, hey, if I take good care of myself, the other people around me are going to benefit from that.
It's not selfish, it's science. It's not selfish, it's self-full. It's not selfish at all. And here's another mind-blowing thing. I can't train myself. Like I've written training programs for 208 Olympic athletes to put dozens of people on the podium at the Olympics. I've trained special forces soldiers in between deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Like I can write a really good workout. Right. I can't write my own workouts. I don't do them. I take one look at them and I go for a walk. So you have to have someone else coach you. Yeah. I truly believe that. Serena Williams has a coach, right? She's the best in the world. Yeah. And so even though this is our craft, even though this is what we do, I do believe that it's important for all of us to get coaching, guidance, and accountability around where we're trying to go and what we're trying to become. And yeah, that's really, really, really important. So yeah, I did put it first. It hasn't always been first, but it definitely is first right now. And it's also kind of cool because I thought about surrounding myself with people who are also on the same journey, right? Who are also trying to be healthy, fit, and making sure that my mindset is surrounded by people that are thinking the same way that I am. Yes. And during COVID and all those 3-4 years that we had that type of stuff going on, and I'm in Canada, so we were quite restricted. I had a group of people that we texted each other every single time that we did a workout. My 5 buddies, right? And so we were sending photos and screenshots and workout distance and all those sorts of things, which was amazing for keeping motivated. I'm now realizing that my wife, Judith, is a runner. She's out doing that stuff. My daughter's a swimmer. She's doing her thing. Adam's 9. He just loves hitting stuff with stuff, basketball, tennis, golf, anything, right? Where you can throw something really, really hard. And so now I'm just engaging with my family, given that they are constantly active. Yeah, and that's just part of who we are at the moment. So I'm trying to build this world around myself, surrounding myself with people. And then right now it happens to be just my family who are interested in health, well-being, training, physical fitness to make success inevitable. Because when everyone around me is talking about their workout, it makes it very easy for me to be like, I got to go for a run. So that's another sort of piece of the puzzle.
I love it. I love it. Now, one thing that trainers and coaches love to talk about, obviously, is training. But one of the things that I love about you is you kind of flip that on its head and you talk a lot about recovery, because we know if you're not recovering, you're not really getting the most out of those training sessions. So one thing you talked about in your most recent book was this idea of the 1-2-3 rule. So 1 hour daily, 2 days per month, 3 weeks off per year. Could you just walk us through that in short? Because I think that's such a great approach to thinking and planning recovery.
It's interesting because when we're training at a really, really high level, and this could also be like you coaching at a high level, you actually doing the workouts, whatever your craft is, the tendency is to think that that's the key. The workout is the key to your success. And the reality is even the top people in the world are training 2, 4, maybe 6 hours a day at the most, which leaves a lot of other time for us to do other things that impact whether or not we're going to adapt positively to those stimuli that we're putting upon ourselves in the gym or in the practice. And we are really, if you want to think about it, we're 24-hour athletes. So everything you do all day long is going to influence whether or not you're going in the direction that you want to go. And when we start to think of ourselves as 24-hour athletes, then sleep becomes important. Your nutrition becomes important. Stretching becomes important. Massage therapy becomes important. Cold and hot become important. Relaxation becomes important. Learning becomes important. And so recovery and regeneration is the key to ongoing success, ongoing adaptation, and prevention of burnout. Yep. And the 1-2-3 rule is that I would love for people to deliberately recover 1 hour a day, 2 days a month, and 3 weeks a year. So 1 hour a day means something that's good for you that's purely for recovery. And I mean like really recover. So you're doing almost nothing if you've been training. Could be sitting there reading a book, could be meditation. I would even classify massage therapy as like even less than that, right? So we're talking about like true passive recovery, something that's going to grow your mind and chill you out. I also think it's really important for us to take 2 days a month off. And whether that's from work or from training, gives your body that 48 hours to heal, repair, regenerate, get rid of some of those injuries, just have that energy to direct towards recovery and regeneration. And I also believe that we need 3 weeks a year off. And we used to think that that was too much. You'd lose too much. You'd regress too much over that time. But I think if there's, the few things to take away from the COVID environment that we've been in, the pandemic, is just when we did take those days, weeks, months off, in some cases, many world-class athletes came back to training after that break really healthy, completely rested, injury-free, and took it to another level completely. And we saw an extraordinary number of world records from athletes who had taken much longer times than we ever thought possible off, and were actually healthier, fitter, happier at the end of the day as a result of it. So anyway, 1 hour a day, 2 days a month, 3 weeks a year. And that can be from training, or it could be from you working, could be you especially completely disconnecting from tech. That's really, really important.
Yeah. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways, was just that idea of disconnecting from some of the technology, because look, it's so easy now, right? Like, we're constantly connected, whether it's listening to a podcast. Like, you're not just going out for a walk, right? It's like you have to multitask everything. So I'm going to drive to work and listen to a podcast, and I'm not saying don't listen to podcasts, right? Because that's bad for both of us. We want people to listen to podcasts, but be deliberate in the time of, hey, if I'm going to do this, it's because I choose to, but I'm also going to have these dedicated periods of time where I'm totally going to shut off, relax, and focus on myself and my own recovery.
And the science backs that up. And I'm a big fan of Traffic University. I live in a city with a lot of traffic. I spend a lot of time in the car. And when I'm in the car, I try to listen to an audiobook. I try to listen to a podcast. So I'm learning. And it's funny, when we were at home for a year during the start of the pandemic, and I wasn't in the car very much, I realized I wasn't learning, because that's my primary method of learning at the moment. So we want to be learning. We want to be deliberate about that. But there's a certain unique benefit to allowing your mind, allowing your brain to deactivate, to slow down, which then opens up completely different ways of thinking. So when we are in full-on hustle, focus, execute, get stuff done mode, you're coaching, you're going through your email to-do list, you're interacting as you and I are right now, we're in what's known as a beta brainwave mode, which is 16 to 30 hertz. You can stick electrodes over the brain and measure it. It's 16 to 30 cycles of electricity per second. It's our hustle, focus, execute, get stuff done mode. Amazing for clearing out your to-do list, right? But it's very tiring. And it depends upon single tasking. If you're multitasking, jumping back and forth between different things, it's energetically exhausting, which is why we end up with brain fog, and at the end of the day, and you're so exhausted you can't even think or look at someone or carry on a conversation. Amazing for getting stuff done, super tiring. The way to do it well is single tasking. Multitasking destroys our ability to do that. But if we slow down, right, relax, decompress the brain, slow the brain down into alpha brainwave states, that is sort of that 15-ish, 10 to 15 hertz zone. That's the zone where you can learn, you can strategize, you can plan, you can deconstruct, and you can reflect. And in order to get into that state, we need to give ourselves permission to relax the mind, to leverage the power of solitude, of stillness. And when we're still of body and mind, then the mind can start to play with different scenarios. We can imagine a different future. We can plan out how we're going to do something. We can reflect about what worked or what didn't work. We can journal, which you cannot do when you're activated. You cannot do that when you're going through your email list. You cannot do that while you're text messaging. You cannot do that while you're doom scrolling through social. You can't even do it while you're listening to a podcast, actively listening to a podcast. So we need to give ourselves permission to give ourselves some time, whenever you want to, day, week, month, year, to enter into that alpha brainwave state, to be able to learn, to strategize, to plan, to navigate the complexity of our life. If you slow down even further, you enter into what's known as a theta brainwave state, where you can be creative and you can problem solve, you can ideate and you can innovate. That's really relaxed. Like you're on the verge of falling asleep. It's like daydreaming. And that's where you're going to come up with the new revolutionary ideas. And in that space, you have to be completely tech free. You cannot have any technology around you, because the instant that it goes off, it pops you right back up into beta brainwave mode. So giving ourselves permission to use tech to get things done, which we absolutely do in beta brainwave mode. That's a great space to leverage AI, to sort of a 50% engagement with technology at the alpha zone to a 0% engagement in technology in the theta brainwave state. That's how we can, I think, navigate this very interesting time that we're in, the massive technology. And I have it all. I've got an Apple Watch, a phone, a tablet, a computer, multiple screens, couple cameras, right? Like I'm surrounded by all of it as we're doing our work right now. But I'll tell you what, when I go for a walk later with the dog, there's nothing coming with me.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. I do the same thing. Okay. So I want to dive deeper into this idea of taking a real vacation. And to give you context, I'm just reminded the first job I took out of college, right? Like I remember I signed the contract, and literally in the contract, it says for the first year, I get 0 vacation days. 0, right? The second year, I get 1 week of vacation. But the way things worked out, my wife and I had gotten engaged the year before. So I didn't get to take that vacation until our honeymoon. And it was like almost at the end. So I went like 2 years straight without a vacation. And one thing you really try and impress upon people in your book is that, hey, look, you got to take a real vacation. Why is it so important?
Because when we're able to get away from our day-to-day, it gives you a chance to completely recover and regenerate. Obviously, your physiology improves because you're not under that pressure of stress. It's quite likely your cortisol levels will return to normal cycles throughout the course of the day. Adrenaline will come back down to resting levels. Epinephrine will come down to resting levels. Endorphins in your brain will begin to circulate again. You'll hopefully be able to get yourself back out of the constant need for dopamine hits, which exists in our society at the moment.
Yeah.
And you'll really notice this start to play out 4, 5, 6 days into your break. The first few days, you're just going to be trying to get off you're going through heroin withdrawal at that point in time, and just sort of trying to, you'll probably sleep the entire time instead of actually enjoying your vacation. But as soon as you're into that 6, 7, 8 days zone, that's when the layers of tension start to release. That's when you start to actually recover, actually repair, actually regenerate. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to swing together a couple of weeks in a row, the second week is a completely different experience. You start laughing again. You look at people, your eyes are clear. You'll start ideating. You'll be able to see new ways and new perspectives of doing things. New perspectives in terms of how you might be able to approach your life. And there's very good data that shows that people who take vacations rise faster through the ranks of the organizations that they work for than people who do not. So we often think that vacations compromise our careers. It's actually, the data is completely clear that it's the opposite. It's the people who do take the vacations that are the ones who are more successful over the long term. So it makes sense for us personally, but it also makes sense for us professionally as well.
That's so interesting. I'm also reminded when I was doing in-home training, I worked with this very successful entrepreneur, and he would go to Hawaii for these huge swaths of time, right? Like he was like minimum 2 weeks, preferably 3. I was like, well, that sounds amazing. And he's like, well, it's, the time change. It's like a 6-7 hour time difference. He's like, but look, I'm telling you, by the time you get to like day 7, day 8, he's like, you're totally different. And I'm like, well, okay, I can see that. But now you're saying the same thing. It's just so interesting because he has, he's in like apartment buildings or something like that. But he's saying the exact same thing you are. He's like, look, by day 7 or 8, he's like, you're a totally different human. You're so relaxed. You're so chilled out. And then like the vacation really starts. So that's fascinating.
It is. And it's so strange because I talk to people, many people haven't taken a true vacation in years. And now they go on vacation, they're checking their phones constantly. And if they're not checking their phones, they're on social. Yeah. So are you really getting a break? And I think that it's an uncommon advantage right now to give yourself that chance to decompress, to clear out the habits, to then come back into the real world, if you will, with a completely clean slate about what you do on a daily basis. That way you can pick and choose what you want to carry forwards when you get back into the rhythm of normal life. And one of the coolest things is when you're away for a while, you see things that serve you and you see things that don't. And having the courage to lean into the things that do work and let go of the things that don't, or even block them in some cases, is how we can reset every 6 months, every year maybe, and find ways of putting ourselves on that upwards trajectory in our life, whatever that looks like. Like it could be, wow, you know what? I really noticed that I love having dinner with my family when I'm on vacation. We don't do that at home. Once a week when we're back in the world, on Sunday, Saturday, Friday, whatever night works for you, we're going to have dinner as a family and really lean into that and block that time, protect it, and make that happen and make it special. That's an example of things that you might notice on a vacation that you install in your life once you get home. You may also notice that when you wake up in vacation, you go for a walk every morning outdoors, you feel like $1,000,000. And when you get back, what do you do when you wake up in the morning? You doom scroll through social and check the news. Why do you not feel so good? Probably because you're doom scrolling through social and you're checking the news. Maybe you want to give yourself a media fast in the morning and only check your devices at 9 a.m., not 7 a.m., that sort of thing. So I think it's a chance to gain some perspective and craft a life of deliberate intention rather than compulsion, which is how I believe many of us are functioning at the moment in a world where the algorithm is deciding where our attention goes rather than where we want our attention to go.
Yeah, I love that, man. So speaking of nutrition, having meals with your family, all that good stuff, there was an equation you had in your book. I'd never seen it before. I'd like to think I, kind of keep up on nutrition, recovery, all those other pieces. But the equation was health equals nutrients over calories. I mean, dude, this is so simplistic when you take a step back, but I was like, but this is also super powerful. Could you talk to me a little bit about that? So health equals nutrients over calories.
Yeah, and it's not my equation. It's actually, I read it in another book and I'm blanking on the name of the book. It was, and so I'm going to look it up and see if I can find it.
And then you send it to me and we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll send it to you and we'll put it in the show notes because it is not my equation. But basically the simple idea is this, is that your health depends upon increasing nutrient density and optimizing the number of calories. Often people mistake it as lowering calories. It's not, it's optimizing calories. You want to have enough calories to make sure that you have enough energy throughout the course of the day to do what you want to do at the highest possible level. And then within that framework, radically increasing the amount of nutrients that you can consume per calorie, which means that, raw sugar, for example, all calories, no nutrients, and you need sugar.
Right.
Like your brain uses sugar, your muscles use sugar. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just but it's not high nutrient. Whereas when we eat the rainbow of fruits and veggies, you're packed full of polyphenols, flavonoids, vitamins, minerals, and every different color of fruits and vegetables has a different nutrient profile, which means when you eat the rainbow, you're probably covering all of those bases. Similarly, when it comes to meat, we're avoiding factory farmed, industry raised animals. We're leaning more towards as organic as you can afford. And I realize that there's a whole bunch of finances involved with that. So again, as I mentioned, as organic as you can afford and doing the best you can under those frameworks. So it really is all around trying to increase that nutrient density. And I was challenged on this recently and it did change my thinking. I did a talk and I mentioned that and I explained and I showed the images of the 200 calories of zero nutrient foods, like a bunch of gummies. And it's like, there's nothing there, right? It's like half of a hot dog. And then there's 200 calories worth of nutrient dense foods. And it's like 3 kiwi fruits. It's a package of carrots. Like there's so much food that you can have when you're eating that other way. And the person mentioned to me, and they were super respectful about it. Like a lot of people have really, not great relationships with food for a whole ton of different reasons. And they mentioned that the way that I explained it brought that out. And I talked to a good friend of mine, Dr. James Rouse down in Colorado about this. And he said, there's an approach that I've been taking recently that helps with that. And the approach that he's been taking, where I think this H equals N over C equation is evolving to, is nutrition for healing. Not even nutrition as fuel. Of course, we need energy to get through the course of the day. But thinking about our food as healing. I've done a workout. What's the best way for me to heal, repair, and regenerate our bodies? Obviously, carbohydrates to refuel, proteins to rebuild, fats to help the nervous system, but then all of the polyphenols and flavonoids to speed the cleaning out of oxidation and the repair that comes about as a result of inflammation. And that idea of the evolution of that equation, I'm sure, is getting into eat for fuel, eat for healing. And I think that might be a little bit of a more positive way to think about it, that enables everybody to access that in a way that works for them. And when I think about, is this food going to help me heal from stress, from work, from my workout, from whatever it happens to be, that's really helpful. And it's been helpful for me a lot and some of the other people that I work with. So yeah, that's that equation and where I think it's going.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I like that idea of repair and healing. I think anytime we're having this discussion of moving away from, I had a girl on my podcast now, I'm blanking on her name. I think it was Christina Chu, but we were having this discussion and she said the big thing she wants to emphasize is moving away from this mantra or this mindset of diet and exercise, right? Diet and exercise versus like training and fueling. And I think this is such a more healthy, like long-term sustainable approach. Diet and exercise is, outcome based. I just want to get to a certain scale weight or whatever versus, hey, fueling, training. These are things that I do all the time, just like repairing. Hey, I just did a hard workout. I'm repairing my body so I can go back and I can do it at a higher level the next time.
Think about it. Dieting is hard. It's restrictive. Yeah. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I saw a cartoon that said it's die with a T, right? Like it just doesn't feel very good.
Yeah.
And even training is hard. Yep. It's difficult, requires a lot of energy. And of course, if you're trying to do a marathon or win the Olympics, then you need to train. It's not part of a conversation. But the data shows that about 85% of North Americans don't get enough physical activity to prevent a chronic disease. It's not even to be healthy. It's just not to get sick. And 85% are not even doing that. The numbers are far worse for children.
Wow.
So when we talk about training, immediately that has nothing to do with 80 to 90% of the population. So if we're going to capture and change the world and get out of a treatment-based medical system and into a prevention model that won't bankrupt our society over the next 15 to 20 years, as the twin epidemics of obesity and aging, not that aging is an epidemic, it's just a process of life, and the baby boomers are moving through that phase of life. Therefore, that's going to be a challenge on our medical system because 80% of our medical bills accumulate in the last year of our lives, right? So we have the twin crises of obesity plus aging at that time of our lives coming together. Our medical systems are going to be extraordinarily strained. Therefore, we must move from treatment to prevention. How do we do that? Nutrition, exercise, sleep. But I also believe, and it's hard for me as someone who coaches and has coached Olympians, and I've done the blood work, done the heart rate zones, all that sort of stuff, to get out of the mindset of you have to train, you have to hit heart rate zones, you've got to do 2 strength workouts and 3 runs. And like, all I want you to do is be more physically active on a daily basis, which gets into what you said, which is now it's all about process, not outcome. This is just what I do. I go for my walks. I jump in the lake. I do my stretching. It's my workouts, my things that I do, but they elevate my life. This is who I am. This is what I love to do. And when we get into things that we love to do, it's inevitable. I love going, had an incredible woman in one of the programs that I run that started to walk from the subway to the school every day that she was working at. And it was only a mile, but she did this every single day for the entire year. And I live in Canada. It's cold here. There's snow and awful weather and all sorts of other stuff. She did it all the way through the winter. And she was a massive inspiration for the school just because she was so consistent. And physiologically, she changed. She was so much happier, so much clearer, so much more clear, so much less stressed. And in June, she was a different human being because she walked for 20 minutes a day. So that's the game now. It's just like, what can we install in our lives? What can we do that's easy? What can we do that's consistent? And I know that so many people are coaches and trainers, and you've got people with great goals. Of course, help them to achieve that. But it's the consistency and our ability to install this as something that we do forever, that we love to do, that elevates us mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's a completely different approach than I've had throughout my entire life. And maybe that's a factor that, of my age, but I also see that in some of the athletes that we work with and there's such a better emphasis on mental health, taking breaks, working really, really hard, but then also exploring deep recharging to keep the twin cycles of excellence going, the performance and rest cycles, the infinity loop going forever. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's an important one.
No, I love it. And one other thing you kind of mentioned in there was like the power of sleep. right? And I know you talk about this quite a bit in your books. Talk to me about the power of pre-bed routines and rituals. This is something that I've used for, geez, I'm thinking like 20 years now. I remember, being in my early 20s, powerlifting, like doing like progressive relaxation and then visualizing before I'd go into like powerlifting workouts. So talk to me about the power of these routines and rituals before bed.
I think habits, routines, and rituals are so important and powerful for us. And I'll take it beyond just routines and rituals, and I'll walk through habits, routines, and rituals because I think they're different. Okay. So habits are sequences of behaviors that we have built up through practice that are automated. They don't require conscious thought. They save brain energy to be able to allocate that energy to other things, to learning, to figure things out, to problem solving. But you don't need to think about brushing your teeth. You don't need to think about how to tie your shoes. You don't need to think about the route that you drive to work. So those are now automated. Those are the habits. And we want to make sure that our habits serve us. So it's worth tweaking and training those to be better. But they are our sort of automatic co-pilots throughout the course of the day. Routines are habits that are sequences that are a bit more involved than just habits. That could be the routine that you run in the morning. I wake up, go to the washroom, go for a walk, get some water, have breakfast, check my email, drive the kids to school, right? Like that's a typical routine that you would run. Rituals are habits or routines that are deliberate, intentional, and most importantly, have deep meaning for you. So think about an athlete running a routine before a game. They always do the exact same thing. It's super intentional, and it's designed to put them into a place where they can perform at a world-class level. So that could be a routine for the coaches and trainers listening today. That could be a routine that you run in the morning to get your energy level to the place that it needs to be to convey positivity and energy and excitement and inspiration to all of your clients that you run. Then you might have a routine and or ideally ritual because it's meaningful to you, part of a transition ritual, so you can decompress so that when you come home and engage with your loved ones, you're in a different place than the cheerleader coach that you are in the gym. Maybe you're more of a nurturing, listening, open vessel for your family to talk to at the end of the day, right? So we have these rituals that world-class performers install in their lives to enable them to do what they love to do at the highest level. So I encourage people to check your habits, optimize your routines, but craft rituals to take you to the next level. And a great example of that is around how we get ready for sleep. Because what we do in that last hour makes a huge difference. I really believe that we need to defend that last hour specifically against light and technology, which is activating. I had a judge once messaged me and he said, "I can't sleep. What's going on?" I was like, "What are you doing in the hour before you sleep at night?" He's like, "Well, I watch CNN." Really? So you're watching the news and then having trouble sleeping.
Right.
And I just stopped. He was like, "Oh." I was like, "Yeah, maybe there's something else we can do in that last hour that is going to make you actually able to fall asleep." So we got rid of the television out of the bedroom, helped him find some great books to read, fiction, not industry reports, great stories, such that he can disconnect from the crazy days that he was having at that time, calm down, settle the mind, still the mind and body, decrease the body temperature, decrease the psychological activation such that it's easy for you to fall asleep. It's really hard for us to go from full speed emailing, where the brain is hyperactivated, cognitively demanded, into a state where you're able to decrease your body temperature, decrease the frequency of brain waves, enter into that delta state, which is very, very slow brain waves, such that you can fall asleep and stay asleep. And when we defend that last hour, that's what enables us to do that. Within that last hour, I encourage people to think about the 20-20-20 rule. 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. 3 things that in sequence help you to downshift, calm down, become still of mind and body, such that you can fall asleep and stay asleep. Everyone's 20-20-20 formula will be different. It could be meditation, hot bath, reading. That's a game changer. Just try that one out, see how it works for you. but think about it and give that one a shot. Build a 20-20-20 protocol for yourself as part of that last hour and try it. And if it works for you, great, go with it. And if it can be tweaked to make made better, that's awesome. But in our world right now, which is so busy, so addictive with our devices, and so tempting with the incredible shows that are available to us on the various different streaming platforms, it's hard to give yourself, to break away from it all. And so I encourage people to try that out. That was a long-winded answer to your question about rituals and routines and sleep, but that's the game.
No, I love it. I love it. And I don't know if you talked about 20-20-20 in the book, but it's got me thinking now because I have a 20-20-20. 20 minutes, generally like hot shower, 20 minutes stretching, breathing, that sort of thing, and then 20 minutes of reading. And you're absolutely right. It's got to be fiction. I've tried to go against this. If it's industry related, it switches my brain back on. So if people came in my bedroom right now, they would probably think like a 7-year-old boy lives in there because there's like comic books and stuff next to my bed. But total like brain dump, right? Like I'm totally relaxed. It's not engaging in that sort of way to where my brain switches back on. And by the time I'm ready to go to bed, I'm ready to go to bed and get a great night's sleep.
I have Calvin and Hobbes next to my bed.
Yes,
like I spent 15 years in grad school. There's a lot of other things that I could be reading, right? But I've got Calvin and Hobbes there right now. And when Calvin and Hobbes aren't there, it's Harry Potter. And when that's not there, it's Lord of the Rings, right? Like I have nothing to do with real life. So yeah.
That's great. Okay. What is act, think, feel versus feel, think, act?
Leading into the 2012 Olympics, I was commentating for Canadian TV in London, and I was exploring all of the athletes and how they were getting ready and, doing my research, and heard that an athlete, Alex Despetit from Canada, was in Spain training, and he did a backflip off the 1 meter board, and he hit his head on the board, and it split his forehead open and peeled back his skull. So literally had almost 40 stitches across his forehead. Scalp was pulled back, concussion, blood everywhere. Like it was really, really bad. He got the stitches, got repaired, cleared the concussion, and barely managed to return to competition right before the games. And I was fortunate enough to be in London. Most of the time I was in the studio, but in this case, I had a couple of hours. So I went and walked over to the pool and I got to watch diving, and I saw him practicing. And he was doing the exact same dive that he did a month before in Spain, because he had to do that one in competition.
Oh my gosh.
And when I looked at him behind the board, he was standing tall, chin was up, shoulders were back, palms were open towards the pool, eyes were closed, and a little grin on his face. And he was just breathing. He was so relaxed and in the most, he almost looked like Superman flying.
Yeah.
And then he stood up on the board and executed a flawless, beautiful dive. And I was like, that's not what I was expecting to see.
Right.
And I went and researched it, as I do when I see things that don't conform to my expectations. And what I realized is that the vast majority of the world functions in the order of feel, think, act. We have certain emotions, which then create certain thoughts, which then drive certain behaviors. So in this case, the emotion would have been fear, which would have driven the thoughts of, what if I crash again? Which would have led to the behavior of physical tension. He did the opposite. He started with body position, shoulders down and back, chin up, grinning, eyes closed, deep relaxing breaths, zero physical tension, which is how he was able to then have the thoughts of the visualization of the dive that he wanted to do, and then the emotion of confidence. So the vast majority of the world functions in feel, think, act. And what world-class performers do is the opposite: act, think, feel. So for all of us, when there's an outcome that we're trying to get at, I would encourage you to think about, what is the behavior that I need to do in order to get there? What's the mindset that I need to have? And then the emotion that I'm going to create, rather than allowing it to go in the other direction. This is hyper unusual in the world. And it goes against some of our physiology and some of our evolution, which, we're designed and we have evolved to pay attention to the crackling of the bushes in the space outside of the field of vision of the campfire, because if you don't hear the saber-toothed tiger, you're the one that's going to get eaten.
Right.
So we're programmed to notice negativity. We're programmed to notice and react to fear, which is why the news cycle is the way that it is. And world-class performers don't do that. It's one of the major reasons why I recommend not looking at the news. You can know what's going on. I don't want you not to know about what's happening in the world, but I don't think immersing yourself in the deep analysis of this on a regular basis all the time is going to serve you. If you're trying to do other great things in the world, like coaching someone to be healthier or training someone to be fitter, when we are aware of what we do in the world where we can have a positive impact and we set ourselves up for success, that's what enables us to do things a little bit differently. And the act, think, feel protocol is a core part of that.
I love that. Okay. So I'm not going to tell this entire story, but we're kind of in the like swimming and diving space. And you told this amazing story about Michael Phelps. Right now, hopefully everybody listening in has, knows who Michael Phelps is and know that he's like the most decorated swimmer of all time. But I didn't know this part of the story, right? Because if you're of a certain age, you saw him win all these medals and you think, oh my God, this guy's amazing. And then you saw the whatever it was, 6 months to a year where he was totally like derailed, right? He's in the news for all the wrong reasons. But one thing that was really interesting, you said on the back end of this is that, Michael Phelps is talking to all these people and then he's got this one friend, right? And we've all hopefully got this one person, at least one person in our life that will step up and challenge us. And you got to think at this time, he's dealing with one of the most highly decorated swimmers of all times. And he just says to Michael Phelps, is that the best you can do? And I'm just imagining this conversation, right? The gall to say this to this guy. And again, something switches. And now Michael Phelps just like lit on fire, goes out and obviously dominates another Olympics or two after that. How important is that to have those people in your life and to maybe like just deal with some of those struggles and have somebody on the other side that's willing to challenge you and push you forward?
Imagine that. Your buddy, the greatest Olympian in history.
Yeah.
The most medals ever by anyone. The most decorated person. He's in rehab and he calls you to make amends for all of the stuff that's gone on. And can listen to a great interview that he did. I think it was with Rich Roll on his podcast, 2.5 hours about all of this. And it's an unbelievable discussion. It's well worth exploring. And Michael's been very public about his struggles with mental health and getting pulled over twice for driving under the influence and photographed smoking weed out of a bong. And, this 2014. So, and I saw him race in 2012. He was methodical, but he wasn't really racing at a high level. He won a whole bunch more medals, but he wasn't happy. I saw him in 2014 in California and he looked awful, just looked like a broken human. He was not happy. Yeah. And then I saw him in 2016 in Rio and I was like, this is the fittest he's ever looked. And most importantly, he was constantly smiling. Yeah. He was laughing on the block, like on the medal podium. He was smiling. He was hugging people. He was high-fiving. He was in a completely different headspace. And it's because in between that 2014 to 2016 space, his buddy challenged him. And he called him for rehab and had the conversation. And in that middle of that conversation said, is this all you've got? Is this the best that you can do? Imagine saying that to the best athlete in history who's in a dark place, and you throw this out there and challenge them. It is so important that we identify the people in our lives who love us unconditionally, who support us within reason, who challenge us to be our best, who don't judge us, who have no expectations.
Yes.
No judgment, no expectations, unconditional love, unconditional support, who challenge you to be the best version of yourself, which by extension means you also then need to identify who are the energy vampires who do the opposite.
Yes, sir. Yep.
And make some hard decisions around that to spend more time with the people who love you, who elevate you, who challenge you, and who support you. And I think that Michael was very blessed in that moment to have a friend that was able to ask him the right question at the right time.
Yep.
To spark the turnaround. Because Michael said after that, he's like, nope, not even close. And he went and got his swim trunks, went down to the pool at the rehab center and started swimming again. And and that led to, another Olympics of, having an incredible results. Didn't win 8 gold medals, but he won a whole bunch more medals. But more importantly, I would argue, was happy. And that's the key. So how important is it? It's everything. It's really, really, really critical.
Man, okay, so we've touched on this topic a couple times now, and I've had this discussion with numerous people for many years. This is my last year running it. I did this annual group, right? So it's like all the pieces, right? Like I write your training, I help you with your nutrition, recovery, mindset. And one of the things that we do later on in the year, after we've kind of got some momentum going, is we do this really honest reflection of the people in your life. Right. And you just alluded to it. You've said it a couple times now, like when it's exercise, hey, I want to surround myself with the right people. Same thing in this case. Saying goes, you're like the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. So taking an honest look and appraisal at that. But then the other thing that I like to talk about too is creating this like energy bubble around yourself, right? Just like this mental, emotional bubble where I'm just keeping the bad juju out. For lack of a better term. But you're so right, man. And it's very hard. Like the energy vampires, sometimes they just kind of seep into your life. And next thing you know, they're like leeching at your neck. And you're like, why am I depressed? Why am I sad? Why am I struggling? Well, again, this is where you have to constantly, maybe it's during your vacation, right? Another theme of this show, but like taking dedicated time to look at yourself, your life, the people around you, and making sure that all of those things are congruent and pushing you in the right direction.
And the amazing thing that popped in my brain while you're talking about that is that it may not necessarily be the people who are physically in your life. This can also be the podcast that you listen to, the people that you follow on social media, the magazines that you read. It's a full spectrum of who has access to your brain. And doing that audit of figuring out who are the people in my life. And of course, some of them are real people that could be members of your family, could be your friends, could be colleagues at work. Absolutely. Who are the 5 people in your dream team, your personal life who elevate you? Who's in your brain trust? The 5 people in your professional life who elevate you. Get laser clear on that. More time with those people, less time with the energy vampires personally and professionally. But also understand that what podcasts you listen to makes a difference. What are the audio books that you're consuming? Who do you follow on social? That's massive. But not only who do you follow on social, what media are you consuming on social? Because that then drives the algorithm to give you more of that. When I was training for Ironman, every morning I would wake up, make a coffee, and watch videos of people training for Ironman, or I would just watch replays of Ironman World Championships to get motivated to go out for my run. I had a completely different experience in the first 6 months of COVID where I was studying photography and I would watch photography videos, but I wasn't getting the same media sent to me to motivate me to go out and do that training.
Yeah.
So whatever you consume, you're going to get more of. So think about that. Who are you talking to? What are you listening to? What videos are you watching? Because all of it rewires your brain. For better or for worse, your brain is rewiring itself constantly 24 hours a day based upon what you act, think, say, and do. So, and I don't mean we need to be perfect. I am not perfect. No. I don't want to be perfect. I want to have some fun. I want to goof off sometime. Stranger Things was an amazing weekend. But the vast majority of the time, I want to be doing things that elevate me and making sure that my circle of genius, or as you say, your energy bubble that blocks out all of the craziness, is one of the most important things for us to do. And a great way to get started on that is identifying who are the 5 people in my dream team, personal life, and who are the 5 people in my brain trust, professional life, who are going to elevate me and who I am also going to elevate at the same time.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, one more kind of big question, and then we'll start to wrap things up. So, final thing that you talked about in the book that I absolutely loved was this idea of the time shift. I also call it a reset button, but I think we're talking about the same thing here. And one of the things that I've really tried to do over the years is that, when I was younger, if something bad happens at 9 a.m., man, it's taken me the rest of the day to get over that, right? It's like, okay, well, tomorrow will be better. And one of the things that I love about you is you're trying to, hey, man, we're going to try and shift that faster, right? For me, it was like, how little, if something awful happens to me at 9 a.m., how long will it take me to hit the reset button and get back to baseline? So let somebody say something awful happens. Somebody has a minute, or maybe they have an hour. What are some really practical ideas that you have that they can implement to try and hit that reset button and get back to baseline faster?
Got it. One thing to add to that I've learned since I wrote that book, and this came from a conversation with Dr. Alex Auerbach, who was the mental skills coach for the Toronto Raptors NBA team. And one of the things that he tracked during the course of the season was the amount of time that it took from when a player missed a shot until they were obviously fully recovered and re-engaged with the game. So you imagine taking a shot, missing, you're like, right. And they mow back up the floor. And they're bad, but we've all been there. That's why I can describe it so accurately, right? Like we've all been there. How long does it take for you to recover? And working with the players to decrease that amount of time, because ultimately you've got a second until you're on defense, and sometimes even less than that if they're on a fast break. So your speed of recovery is critical if you want to be into high performance. So when it comes to all of us, in terms of, let's say you have seconds to recover. Something's just come at you. You're like, oh my gosh, you're agitated. I've got to pull myself together here. It's one long, deep breath.
Okay.
Changes your physiology. 3 deep breaths, magical. And the key thing there is that the exhale must be longer than the inhale. A long, slow exhale signals the brain to calm down. A sharp, fast exhale signals the brain to increase its activity. Right up to the extreme example of that, which is a tennis player hitting a shot and screaming as they hit the shot. That's a hard exhale to increase their activation level so they can be stronger. The birthday candle breath being the opposite end of that spectrum, the long, slow breath that ends with a smile and a laugh, right? So that's what we want to try to get there. If you have minutes to recover, one of the magic things that you can do is simply 2 minutes of mindfulness. That's 2 minutes of thinking about your breath, 2 minutes of visualizing a beach that you love, right? Like just taking a moment, visualizing the beautiful yellow sand, the sound of the waves crashing, the azure blue, the clouds in the sky, the green palm trees, the white sand near the palm trees, right? Like just getting into that visualization for just a couple of minutes, again, physiologically settles you down. If you have a little bit longer, like an hour, you can go for a walk. You can even make a great meal. You can call a friend. You can maybe even take a nap. And then if you have days to recover, that's a completely different ballgame. Then you get to disconnect from social, read a book, do something creative. So whatever time frame that you have, there are recovery strategies available to you that fit within that time zone that give you a chance to get up to baseline. And if you have even more time, maybe a little bit above baseline, because the body always super compensates. Whenever we're faced with a stressor and we give ourselves permission to recover, the body prepares itself to handle that stressor in the future by super compensating. Adaptation. Best example of that is you go do weights. You get sore and broken down. The body will rebuild you to be slightly stronger. You go for a run. You get tired. You will be slightly fitter. You're mentally stressed. You sleep. You will be slightly more resilient. This happens over and over and over again. So when we program in those recovery moments, that's what gives the body and brain a chance to actually get on that positive adaptation trajectory rather than on the overwhelm and burnout trajectory. So give yourself permission to take seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks sometimes to heal, repair, regenerate, rest, refocus, recover, and recharge.
I love it, man. Okay, big question time. If you could alter the space-time continuum and give young Dr. Greg Wells one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, it's so, I'm doing a speech at the school that I used to teach at U of T to all the undergrads coming up. And I know I'm going to get that question. So I've been trying to figure out what the answer is. And the reality is that if you gave Greg a chance to go back to the moment in time when I was standing on the beach, about to walk into the water and break my neck, and you gave me a flash forward and I would see everything that's coming up, would you still walk into the water? I would. And the reason why is because I'm alive. I'm healthy, relatively speaking. I've got 2 incredible kids. They're both thriving. I've got a wife who loves me most of the time. I'm challenging. I recognize that it's not easy to marry to Greg. I climb weird mountains and do strange things. I understand that's hard.
Yes.
But the true answer is I would not go back and change anything, because life has been hard, beautiful, incredible, awful, and I have the full range of every experience. And I fear that if I went back, that it wouldn't be the same. Mm-hmm. But if you forced me to make a change, the only message that I would send back would be to go more all in. I feel like I've always been sort of like 80 to 90% in on the things that I've done. And every once in a while, I've been absolutely all in, right? Commentating the Olympics, I was 100% in. No one heard from me for 6 years, getting ready for that one. And the more all in would be the only thing that I would change, right? Yeah. More in on studying, more in on training, more in on relationships, more in on immersive travel. And that would be the only micro adjustment that I would make. But if you really gave me the option of make the changes or not, it's all worked out. Life's supposed to be hard, right? So, yeah.
It's such a great point to take home too, because I think a lot of times there's this fear avoidance when it comes to hard things, right? I mean, Steve Magnus even has a book called Do Hard Things.
Yeah.
But there's so much power in that, and avoiding those hard things, I think, ultimately lead to a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of unhappiness, versus, man, there's a lot of joy in the process if you take a step back and realize, hey, yes, this is hard. Yes, this is difficult. Yes, I am uncomfortable, but ultimately this is pushing me in the direction that I want to go.
We don't often get massive opportunities for growth and development from lying around on the couch. Right? It's not, not going to lead you to great places. If we look back and reflect on our lives and think about, like, what was the moment when I had the greatest, most rapid, most explosive growth in my life? It was probably after a moment of massive challenge. And of course, horrific things happen externally, and we need to cope with that. And that's hard and difficult and painful, and not what I'm talking about. What I'm speaking about is these moments where you lose the job, or you didn't get the interview, or you didn't get the sale, or something went wrong with something that you're implementing that's part of the work that you do, or you make a mistake, or something really tough has happened. That's what leads to the introspection. That's what leads to the deconstruction, the reflection, the opportunity to do things differently, to practice and then get better as a result of that. And that's hard. It's so uncomfortable. I've been so deliberate about giving my kids opportunities to fail and scrape the knees, by analogy, and for real in some cases. Of course, you don't want them to get injured permanently, not what I'm saying. Right. But give them the opportunity to try it out. And even if you know it's not going to work out, let them go, let them fail, and feel what that's like. You know, Ingrid, my daughter, is a swimmer, and she was racing last summer, and she came fourth in a race that she really wanted a medal in. And she missed a medal by one spot, by like half a second in 400 free, which is a 5-minute long event. So not much, right? She just barely missed the podium. And we were driving home. She's like, I deserved that medal. And I was like, no, you don't. And she got
no, I'm sure. How old is she?
13, like rage.
Oh, yeah, I got a 13-year-old.
Massive rage at dad, right? Yes. You don't understand my life. And it was bad.
Yeah.
But the reality is she didn't. Because that other kid, the other swimmer, didn't make the mistake on the last turn that Ingrid made. I know she wanted it. Yeah. She really, really wanted it really bad. But she made a mistake. The other child didn't. The other child deserved to win. And that's a big disconnect between wanting something and deserving it, earning it. And I will do everything in my power to help my kids understand what it truly means to earn something, and also have the experience of really working hard for something and not getting it, and how that feels. Yeah. Because that's not something that's commonly available in our world. We're not allowed to fail in school anymore, right? We snowplow parent. We give out 8th place trophies, which is the bane of my existence as a parent. And so when we have the opportunity to fail, work really, really hard, have the risk of achieving or not, using competition as a mirror to see where we need to improve. You don't want to go to competitions against people that are that you're better than. You must go to competitions with people who are better than you. Otherwise, you won't know where to improve.
Yeah.
So that's the whole game. that's something I work on a lot, trying to give myself permission for that as well. And there have been aspects of my business over the last few years that have not worked out. It really hurt. But we're trying to grow and move from that and find ways of moving forwards. And that's what life is all about, right?
Well, it gives you real feedback. Yeah. Like when you fail, you get real feedback. And I think that's a super important message. Like if you're just winning all the time and everything is success, okay, great. But you fail a couple of times, that's the real feedback. And that's where you really need to make changes.
Exactly. So. And that's where the opportunities lie. There was a study that came out a while ago on NCAA athletes, on the athletes that improved the most over the course of their college careers. And there were two factors that determined whether or not an athlete would ultimately improve over the course of those 4 years. The first one is, do you show up to work out? So attendance was the number one predictor of positive outcomes, more so than the amount of weight lifted or anything else. It was, do you show up? And then the second factor that led to the greatest rate of improvement in their skills as an athlete was the number of failures. And the athletes who had the highest number of failures were those who improved the fastest. It wasn't the ones who had the most success. It was the ones who had the most failures. So we can, I think, completely reframe our relationship with failure from one of fear and whatever all the other negativity associated with that is, towards one where failure is part of the process. We want to do that quickly. We want to learn from it. Don't say do the same mistake over and over and over again, right? But make a mistake, learn, change, test, and do that cycle as fast as we possibly can.
I love it. Okay, man. Last but not least, our lightning round. So fairly short question. Your answers can be as long or short as you like. Number one, obviously between the book and social, I've been following you for a while now. You seem to love a good adventure. What's been the most recent highlight on that front?
Most recent highlight, when I turned 50, I went to a wall called Waterworld. It's a 300-foot high cliff in the mountains in British Columbia. It overlooks a lake. So if you fall off, you're falling into a lake, but from 30 stories up. And it took about 6 hours to climb it, and it's vertical. So that was a huge challenge for me because I'm a decent climber, not a great climber. So that was a full day of pain, suffering, fear, work, tension, stress, failure. But what I'm super proud of and what I will never forget because it was stunningly beautiful. And honestly, the biggest adventure right now is no longer Greg going to cycle across Africa or help raise Ahab run across South America or whatever my adventures have been in the past. It's all about facilitating adventures for my kids. So it's getting them out into the world, giving them a chance to have moments of awe, experiences that they would otherwise not have. I took Ingrid, my daughter, swimming with sharks last summer. Cool. That was super cool. Took Adam out into the woods to do some climbing. Like I'm just giving them exponential opportunities. So my focus is on that for the next little while. Once they're both out of the house, it will definitely shift back to Greg adventures. But those have been a couple of the big highlights over the last few years.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. We also talked about taking breaks. What is your family's favorite vacation spot?
We have two. We have ski and surf. So the number one ski snow zone is in British Columbia in Canada, up in the mountains in a space where there's an inland rainforest. So massive amounts of snow. It's a magical spot. And then the other one is the Pacific coast of Nicaragua. And we love going there to surf. It's completely undeveloped. We've gotten to know all the locals where we go, and it's an incredible spot. We've been going there since Ingrid was 2 and Adam was basically born and on his way there. So those the hot and cold locations that we go to that are absolutely incredible.
Yes, very cool. Okay, so we've talked and had some funny discussions about kids up to this point. Obviously, they're amazing. They can also be stressful. What are some tips that you might have for helping us just be less stressed and more connected to our kids?
Be present. At the end of the day, all they want is your love and attention.
Yeah.
And so when you're with your kids, be with your kids. And that's it. Like when you're at the park, don't sit on the bench, play in the park, get in the sandbox, climb the equipment, chase the kids, right? Like do all of that. One thing that's massively helped me to do that and why I took up photography was that one day I was at the park with Ingrid and she was super into movie called Shrek. May not remember it or not, but it's Eddie Murphy plays the donkey and stuff like that. And it was pretty funny.
Yes.
And there was one moment where the princess looks at Shrek and says, "Your job is not my problem." And I had my phone out at the park, and Ingrid looked at me and she was quoting the princess. She goes, "Your job is not my problem." I was like, oh. So I learned not to take my phone with me to the park, but as what I needed to replace that with was a camera. So I brought a camera with me, like an actual point and shoot camera. And I started taking photos. And so that's why I tried to learn photography, was just be more present with my kids, not distracted by my devices when I am with them. So just be present. That's the big thing.
Dude, it's such great advice. It's so simple. And I think both our kids are about the same age, because my daughter's 13 and my son just turned 10 in October.
Yeah, same age.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, so same age. One of the things that I always try and remind myself of, and it's easier now because they're getting older and there's all these transitions and things in life, is I always try and remind myself, this could be the last time they ask me to do fill in the blank, right? And so when you have that clarity of like, look, they're not going to be little forever. They're not going to want to be carried. They're not going to want to play. I can barely get my daughter to say bye to me when she gets out of the car, and she's not, that's just her. She loves me and we get along great. But like, that's just where you're at in life. So like you said, be present, be in the moment, and just always remind yourself, like, whatever age they're at now, they're not going to be there forever. So enjoy each moment and all the things that come with it.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Okay. Last but not least, number 4, what's next for Dr. Greg Wells? What are you working on? What are you excited about? Like your 28th book? I mean, what's going on?
Just started writing book number 6. Which is bonkers, because if you told my grade 8 teacher that I would be an author, the guy would probably fall over and vomit. So that's book number 6 that's coming up. I want to write 10, so that's my goal in my life. Really focused on trying to be a great speaker and the craft of public speaking. I love it. I really find it to be a huge challenge. That's my craft. I'm trying to radically simplify what I do and focus on work that makes my heart and soul sing. And I'm an atheist, so whatever that means for you. But really getting super narrow and saying no more and yes to the things that are like as Tim Ferriss says, like, if you have to mark it from 0 to 10 and you can't choose 7, is it a 6 or is it an 8? So it's got to be 8 or above. Right. Something that makes you go, fuck yeah, right? I like to, pardon my dropping an F-bomb, but like that's, if you're an hour and a half into this podcast, you might give me a pass on that one. But it's got to be like an F at this point in time for whatever project that I'm working on. And also less on Greg getting out there and hammering stuff, and a lot more on just really dialing in, being a good dad for the next little while that my kids are actually in the house. Like Ingrid's 13, we got 4 years left with her. And she's gone. That means like 3 March breaks, 3 Christmases. Like it's almost done. So we really are trying to just be super present. I don't have a big, huge project at the moment. I'm just trying to get hyper focused, let go of all of the things that are not mission critical, and do my very, very best by doing a lot less than I have done up to this point, and just doing the things that are meaningful, impactful, and spending as much of my time in that space and that energy bubble as I can. Yeah,
I love it, man. Well, Greg, this has been amazing. Love catching up. Where can my listeners find out more about you and all the great work you're doing?
Right on. Everything's in my website, drgregwells.com, podcast, blog, newsletter, social. It's all there. Would be thrilled if people reached out. Just mention that you listen to me on this podcast, and I'll answer you, and I'll get back to you. So that's where I'm at.
I love it. Well, I'll make sure I get links to everything in the show notes so people can find you easily. Again, Greg, this was amazing, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, buddy. It was super great to have this chance to chat, right? And just to spend some time jamming on all of these super fun things. So honored and grateful to be here, and thrilled to be able to serve your audience a little bit.